Hello again, hello again. It must be another day here at the Sense Sphere. Thursday Think Tank goes all personal and nostalgic this time. I will assert that without that breathtaking range of Doctor Who target books, I would not have grown up with a good grasp of vocab, a lively imagination, a love of reading, and eventually become an English teacher, head of English, and English examiner. Harry Potter fans loved their series of books, but it was only about, 7 or 8 or so. Others, Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings trilogy, etc., etc. But we have what seemed like an endless supply of Doctor Who target books feeding the mind. So this is personal. A love letter to Target, to be quite honest, because what a childhood it gave me. Add to that your usual conflated memories and experiences, and you have something that is very precious to you and what your childhood was. The reading rituals, the routine of trying to order or find more books in the range, reading them at school, having your favourite stories replayed, enjoying the covers and illustrations being the first versions of the video. Remember, it didn't exist. So much to explore, and I explore with two other plunderers of the Target treasures, John and Michael. And John has his own personal connection to Target and is one of our original panelists, and you can't keep him off, can you? And Michael, of course, he's a panelist too, and of course, he's got his biography of Malcolm Hulke out. So I thought this might be a nice, tasty one. So let's get them both on and say hello. So he's not going to dance on today because he might pull something for Sunday. So, hiya, John.
Hello, everybody. Hello, Brendan. Not dancing, yeah. I'm hoping to keep myself unpulled in preparation for Saturday's Eurovision Song Contest.
Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, we are going to try and keep away from Present too if we can.
I say Eurovision, not the Intergalactic. That's bound to be worse.
Yeah, it's going to be really problematic. I know.
I'm sure.
So, that's good.
Oh, hello.
Hello. I haven't done that. Let me just tell that to go away because I didn't.
Your hand off that particular knob.
Yeah, that was the wrong. Press the button. Right. So here we go. Michael Herbert. Get him on and say hello, Michael. Here's his book. I'll give you the plug early doors as well. Michael, things are not always what they seem. The writing and politics of Malcolm Hulke. You can see on the left there, the man who wrote TV. We launched it on Sense Sphere. But anyway, good to see you, Michael.
Great to see you, Brendan and John, and everybody else who's tuning in this evening. And thanks to everybody who's bought the book.
Yes, still on Lulu, isn't it?
Yes, still on Lulu. Yes, so available at all well-mannered websites.
So everybody's welcome. It's going to be nice and nostalgic. We've got plenty of covers to talk about. There's some tasty ones there. But I think I'll start with, the reason is, and I wanted to say to you both, they've got more Target books out now from the latest series, The Well, Lux, Robot Revolution. There they are now. Sometimes they try and ape the same kind of skeleton, Achilles illustration. Oh, yeah. Sometimes they do. They've gone back to one of the more original logos, so to speak, not the original one.
No.
But it made me think, I don't think as a kid now I'd want to buy them because we didn't have repeat. We didn't have video. The point was the books did a lot more. I mean, John, fair point?
Oh, absolutely, Brendan. I mean, for those watching this who are not as old as you, or me for that matter. Sorry, Michael. I guess you're younger than any of us. There was no such thing as video recorders back then. This was our only link with what had happened before Doctor Who that was to us in the dim and distant past. So those books were a vital link to Doctor Who's rich past. And for people like me who grew up with Pertwee and Tom Baker, I know I only had the vaguest slight memories of Troughton and none of it at all really of Hartnell. These were that link to the past. Whether or not, and I don't know what these new versions are like, so I can't criticize or critique them, but I know what the stories were like. So good luck with that is all I can say, but they're not that vital link with the past that we, as teenage and beyond Doctor Who fans at the time had. And not only that, but my goodness, were they written by some cracking authors.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. I think the writers are different, the times are different. You can get your Doctor Who piled on the telly if you want. But the other thing is, Michael, I was working as a glass collector in a hotel when I was 16.
Not as a waitress in a cocktail bar, no.
Yeah, and I was doing about 50 hours a week. It was £1 an hour, and they still took blooming tax off. Anyway, £50 I would earn and do my A levels. And I remember trying to save up for this Revenge of the Cybermen VHS. It was the first one that came out. This was in the 80s, the mid 80s. And before then, hardly anything. It was just a kind of drought of anything. So you needed the Target books. But you have a different history with the Target books, don't you? So you might as well kind of just say where you connect.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm so old that I can actually remember reading the original Doctor Who novels, which came out in the 60s. So because I was a big fan of the show from the start. So they produced 3 in the 60s, one by David Whittaker, Doctor Who and an Exciting Adventure with the Daleks.
Yeah.
Then they curiously they did Doctor Who and the Zarbi, which wouldn't immediately occur to you as by Bill Strutton. And then finally David came back to do Doctor Who and the Crusaders. I mean, the choice is interesting, I think. But as I say, as John was saying, there was no repeats. Well, it was only just up to the era where there was video recordings of television programs. Television was live up to about 1959. So there was no idea in either ITV or BBC that they would ever repeat things. So if you missed it, that was it. So as John was saying, books, novels filled that gap for bands. I mean, I wasn't really aware of Target. I was too busy reading other science fiction like Poul Anderson and John Brunner and others in the 60s and 70s. So I became interested in Target when I started to work on Malcolm Hulke. And there's a very good book about the history of Target by David Howe and explaining how Target started, which maybe we can go on to a bit later in the broadcast.
Yeah, we've all probably got that one, and lots of good work there by David Howe. Yep, definitely got that. John, start us off our way, because as Michael's saying there, you know, his relationship with Target's different. He's more as a researcher for Malcolm Hulke, particularly. But I remember being in primary school, John, and you know that little mobile library trolley that would go around, and it had sometimes them kind of well protected hardback books, as well as some sloppy ones and some with pages missing. I remember there was a Cave Monsters one, there was a Day of the Daleks one, and you can imagine who in the class kept grabbing them.
Yeah, you probably making sure that nobody else get their chance. You bad person. How many more Doctor Who fans could we have had but for you hiding them, squirreling those away?
I invented the first repeat system.
I have to get my first memory, and it may well not be correct, this memory, but my first, because there were several books I had, I think, together, bought for me by my parents. But my first memory of reading a Doctor Who book was the Auton Invasion, Spirit in Space, for those of a more TV generation. It was the Auton Invasion. And at that point, not only did I fall in love with Target books, I actually fell in love with reading, because that was just such an ideal example of how to make a children's book and just open a child's mind and make it so exciting. That book is so beautifully paced, so beautifully described. Every character in that book, as written by Terence Dicks, has a purpose, a description, has a life of their own, and just makes it through. And I had a vague memory of watching the Autons on television, so I wanted to gobble this up. And I was absolutely undisappointed by how they were represented in this book. They were absolutely, through the illustrations by Achilles in the book and by how Terence Dicks described. This was a real, if you like, horror story for children. It really was quite horrific. And it was something I returned to again and again and again, because in my Target books, I have to say, I defaced them because they did belong to me.
Yeah.
And I used to write inside the inside cover the date and month, the month and year of when I read it. And the Autumn Invasion, my copy of it has like August 74, July 77, all this sort of stuff, all written when I revisited it. And you can tell, and this is quite, you know, nostalgic in a way, because if if I look at that now, not only can I bring back the memories of reading this book, I can see the progress of my handwriting from being, if you like, a 10, and then go all the way into my teens and then into adulthood. Because I read The Autumn Invasion as recently as 2 years ago, and I still enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed it when I read it as a child. That's a testament not only to the quality of the story, but to Terence Dick's authorship.
Yes, yeah, I agree. I think you need, and I think you need the marrying of a lot of things going on at a great moment. This is mine. So you said The Autumn Invasion. This is mine. I've got it here. The Sea Devils were scribbled all over. Yeah. First book. I think I was just about able to properly read, but you can see. I mean, I've tried to rub out from the back where I've scribbled all over it, and you know what kids are like. So basically, that's
it looks like the common sense to do it inside. You do it inside. That's vandalism.
Vandalism, and there's a few bits inside, sad to say. So you know, Sea Devils is what got me into Doctor Who. Parents obviously thought, aye, we'll get him into reading. Good idea. Except I just scribbled. But Sea Devils, but as you said, John, the early ones had those illustrations. And those illustrations really did fire up the imagination in the days when you didn't have repeats. I know there was a repeat of the Sea Devils, but there's an example. I mean, you could just sit in bed, couldn't you, John, and just stare at that picture?
Oh, forever. You know, isn't it amazing how black and white can be so evocative and just so memory enhancing and inducing? Look at that. The TV program could never be as memorable, as good as it was, never be as memorable as that image. And what was also great, Brendan, is that little line of dialogue, a little line of script put underneath it where we get the description. Not that we needed it, of what was going on. I'm an older reader now, so just remind us of what does that say underneath that illustration?
A sudden beam of intense heat was emitted from the Sea Devil's weapon.
And like we need telling, you know, but then it was there. I look at that. It's years since I looked at that, but that is a wonderful representation of what's in the book. So much better than what we get from the guy from Heidi High in the TV version, but nonetheless, what memories.
So this was my entry point, and you, as John said about him and the Autumn Invasion, I would look back, and let's be honest with you, when you're younger, it's more the visuals.
Yes.
But the visuals, because there were some illustrations in the book, about 5 or 6, you could actually connect to those, and you wanted to then read about it. So basically, it helped. But the attack of the submarine, I mean, whoa! These were the haunting bits that your brain had remembered, the book connected with, and then, of course, you hopefully carry on and read the thing. But the thought, John, is there were no, I'm going to keep saying this, there was no such capacity to repeat or video record, but you could go to bed every night or sit in your lounge or take it on holiday, and you could sit there with the book and you could repeat.
Do you know what? I'm going to use a phrase here, and I hope I don't offend anybody. But for Doctor Who fans of the time, they were almost like holy relics, you know, of a bygone age, which we cherished, venerated almost, because they were our link, as I say, to that past time in Doctor Who. And not only did they flesh out in terms of the script, the text in the things, but we also got better representations of what the TV show was able to do on screen. That, together with a fertile imagination of a preteen child, it connected in a way that would give you memories that would live forever. And no matter how old I get, those books will never be supplanted in my mind as being the best books I've ever read in my life.
Yeah. Now, don't worry, Michael. I know your experience is different, but I'm going to go to your Sea Devil connection, because obviously the Sea Devils is one of the books that really got me. And you have some excerpts in your book about that, don't you? So basically, I've got here for you. You were talking about how Malcolm Hulke, classic writer, loves to embellish and tell us more about the characters.
Oh, yeah. I'll just mention one thing before I do, which was when I was preparing the book, I contacted the Chris Achilles' daughters, who look after his estate, and they very kindly allowed me to use the artwork of the various books that he illustrated. They were very helpful. So I'd just like to sort of publicly thank them. It was Anna and Esther Achilles, so it was nice of them to allow me to use their father's artworks. But in terms of how Malcolm approached the writing of the Sea Devils and other ones was to flesh out many of the characters, not only the main characters, but often the smaller characters. So the Sea Devil begins, for people who haven't seen it recently, with a ship sinking, which is quite a small, very small scene. Someone makes a mayday call, the ship sinks, so that's about it. But here you get a whole couple of pages, 2 or 3 pages about what's going on. And the character he introduces called Mason, who again doesn't appear in the TV, or we don't get his name anyway. And he says that Mason could not believe the men were dead. Only 2 hours before he turned into the night, he'd been drinking cocoa with the Jamaican who really came from Trinidad, had shown Mason a letter from his mother who lived in a town called St. James. So he's introduced a character there. Well, you've very helpfully got it up there. So he's fleshing out that these aren't just a ship with anonymous people sinking. He's turned them into human beings, and kind of really saying that this is a terrible thing to happen to a group of people who are just looking forward to getting into port and then visiting their mothers. So it's kind of humanizing the characters in it, and they're not really just walk-on parts.
Really interesting. Now the thread, I will come to you, don't you, Rory? So share your memories, because I will get back to you. I promise you. But just while we're on that, and just while I'm on the Sea Devils, you also had an element where this great bit later in the story, Max shows how the prison governor Trenchard's ego, naivety, and patriotism have been taken advantage of by the master. And on the TV, his role, as Trenchard, he's
kind of Colonel Blimp, isn't he? Really, for those of us who remember that classic film from the 1940s. So
but it's nice. It's nice to see that Malcolm Hulke wanted to reward the reader with a bit more, and how he's used him, and so it's a great extra little bits where I really do like Malcolm Hulke particularly. I mean, John, you were talking to me in text about the demons and saying there was an extra bit there that you really liked.
Yeah, well, I'll get to that in a second, if I may, Brendan, because just to keep it with Malcolm Hulke, because it was Malcolm Hulke who wrote the Sea Devils, because he does something in Sea Devils, and he does, well, Barry Letts does it with his novelization of the demons, but Malcolm Hulke does it in the Sea Devils, and again in the Cave Monsters. He devotes a whole chapter to the demise of a character who has been misled. In one of this, Dr. Quinn, and by the end of the chapter, Dr. Quinn is dead. And you get, as Michael says, you get that background about how Quinn was basically in the shadow of his father's reputation. All that sort of stuff you don't get in the television. There's no time for it in televised Doctor Who. They thought nobody wanted that sort of character development. You get that, and then there's Quinn's demise, if you like, is covered throughout the whole of a chapter, including how Miss Dawson discovers him. They do the same in the Sea Devils, where they examine Trenchard's patriotism and love for his country being used as a weapon against him by the master. And it's the entirety of that chapter is devoted to Trenchard's ultimate demise at the hands of the master because of using that patriotism as a weapon. But even in the next chapter, which is a beautiful character piece, both about the Doctor and Trenchard, that Malcolm Hulke writes in, is the Doctor moves the safety catch. The Trenchard is found dead, and the safety catch is on. So he's not been able to kill Sea Devil because he's left it on. He's incompetent. He's inept. And that's a little background to Trenchard we get. He's been given this job because nobody else wants him elsewhere, and it's just a nice place to send him. You've only got one prisoner to look after. Don't cock it up. And at the end, he does. And it's the Doctor who covers up his last cock up by moving the safety catch on the Aurora, so nobody knows that Trenchard made a mistake right at the end of his life defending his prisoner, as he's doing. And those are wonderful character touches done by Hulke in that. I could talk about the demons a little bit later because I don't want to go too on, but that's two separate chapters given over by Hulke to ancillary characters just to examine their motivations just before they're disposed of. It's fabulous.
I mean, and just with what I've got on screen, if you see lower down, it says, then Trenchard would truly qualify for the recognition he is so richly deserved, while the master would remain quietly in the background. Already, Trenchard could see himself receiving a knighthood for his services to England in detecting and exposing its enemies. So he's got a motivation. You've got hubris, you've got the whole lot there. I mean, that's the lovely thing about especially Malcolm Hulke. He really knew how to go do it. Now, I just want to bring in a few of our friends in the thread because they've got memories. And of course, this is what it's all about as well. Graham, who remembers staring at the back cover of the first Monster book? That montage of Target covers so excited and intrigued me. Oh, God, yes. I remember that I got that from Pileski's newsagents in Martin. And I remember, I don't know if it was 50p or 10p, I can't remember, but oh my God, because you had photographs of William Hartnell, the Three Doctors, you had all that, which I hadn't really seen much of, apart from seeing the episode. Whoa. And then the Zarbi, you saw them all in there. Oh, yes, I remember that.
It was great marketing,
Oh. And of course, the cover it's a good blooming cover, actually.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Lee Smith, I have a hardback First Doctor and the Zarbi for my geek guru and late uncle. I remember getting, when the members of your family know you're into Doctor Who, so basically you're the dumping spot. They go to every jumble sale and, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember you're not allowed to, I don't know how this is unusual. You're not allowed to bend your book when you read my books. They have to stay very, very
Show me how you read a book.
Yeah. So they're very short stories, actually. But no.
I've got a question for Brendan and John, actually. Just looking at the back of the Sea Devils, it says that you can send off for a free Target badge. And I wondered if either of you ever did that.
Yes.
Based on the Target book symbol, see front cover, this attractive 3-color badge pinned on your blazer label or jumper will excite the interest and comment of all your friends.
Yeah, and unfortunately for some, I did actually, and I had that, but unfortunately with some of those things, you had to cut a little bit out of that and send that away, which I refused to do. I wasn't going to, if I was going to face the books I was writing inside it to do that, but I didn't want to cut. That seemed like vandalism to me. So I remember writing this thing in a way, but you wanted that obviously as proof of purchase in order for you to send it. There was also a variety of different competitions where they would send you back copies. So I ended up with 2 or 3 copies of the Auton Invasion as well, which I'm still
Could you get the free entry into Target draw? Twice a year in June, December, numbers will be drawn from the hat, and the winner will receive a complete year set of Target books.
Yeah.
How wonderful would that be?
Yeah,
well,
it would be very generous. Very generous.
Isn't it funny? Isn't it funny, John? We have this special rule about vandalizing our books. We won't cut them, but we will scribble on them.
that's because we are artists.
We're picky devils, aren't we? Graham, I mean, this is what it's all about, isn't it? My dad used to read a Target to me as a bedtime story, but because this meant only a chapter a night, Target books encouraged me to learn to read by myself so quickly. But I know, but I didn't get them read to me. But Graham, that's amazing because that's like a Doctor Who cliffhanger every night before bed. That's perfection.
Yeah, and some authors are better at that than others, leading onto a cliffhanger. Jerry Sticks tended to do that more so than others, ending his chapters to sort of tease you into the next one. I never had the books read to me, I have to say no, but I did discipline myself to do the chapter night thing when I was younger, especially because I wanted to make this thing last. I really wanted to make it last.
Yeah. Now, there's a few. I've got to bring in some of the comments because they really are funny. What people are saying. For example, if I can just get it up, they're talking about the genesis of the Daleks front covers their favourite, and I am masking various things, but the genesis of the Daleks front cover to me, there it is, made me. Tom Baker looks like Cleo Lane. I mean,
it's more of an afro, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of thought, oh, that's a bit. Anyway, but yeah, fair enough. That each trial, it's a great cover of Davros, I have to say. The first one I read, says Farsight, was Image of the Fendal. Dad got it out of the library, scared me witless. You see,
he's spotting that the Fendaline on the cover of the Fendal is perhaps the scariest representation of the Fendaline you see in the photographs or on television. It is, and for some, I don't know who drew that cover, but that cover is beautifully drawn. It's quite unique the way it's drawn.
Yeah.
Tom Baker looks a bit odd. I don't know what style of art or paint they were using, but it was very good.
Oh God, yeah. So yeah, I mean, of course, tell us your favorite covers, your favorite stories, your favorite memories. So
Can I mention that cover there, Brendan, just before you move to away? The Tomb of the Cybermen.
Yeah.
When I was at school, in secondary school, my art teacher drew that cover for me. He didn't understand my love of Doctor Who, but he said, bring me in a book and I'll draw you the cover. And I brought that in. I don't know whether the time I knew that was the wrong-headed Cybermen, because I hadn't seen Tomb of the Cybermen. I certainly hadn't seen the first thing. But he drew that for me, right down to the 3 bars at the bottom. And I had that in my possession for many, many years later. He's dead now, bless him, Mr. McAllister. So from this world to wherever you are, Mr. McAllister, thank you for doing that for me. And I held on to it for very, very many years.
Oh, this is what it is about. It's the conflation of memories, experiences, and actually, as an English teacher, I think it's so important. I don't know what got me into it, and I don't know what got me to be more proficient at English. However, this clearly was no handicap. The trying to learn the prefix and the kind of the core root word, because they were all scientific mumbo jumbo. Let's be honest. And trying to work out, well, what would the prefix mean on its own? And what does the root word mean? And so what is the doctor saying? All that I would do. So my God, I'm a hell of a good speller now, and I wonder whether these books are having to break down insubordination in Genesis of the Daleks and learn what does genocide mean. Got me somewhere. I really do. And we did it on our own. That is what I mean. It's a real adventure. Harry Potter, I don't dismiss. Lord of the Rings, I don't dismiss. But this is 100+ stories. It was a conveyor belt of more. Now, what I want to say to you now, John, is right. Here's the other thing about being a Target book fan is which ones were you always desperately trying to get? And, whether it's your local Glasgow W.H. Smiths or something, sometimes they get certain ones in that my Middlesbrough store did, and I remember there were certain ones I was hunting for years. What about you?
That's not really a memory for me. I was always able to get these. We were very lucky. We had an outfit called John Menzies, as you would describe it down south. It's a Scots surname, and in Scotland they're called Mingus, John Mingus. But John Menzies in a shopping street in Buchanan Street always had these. And what we later found out was when these were being released, Target eventually give you a release date. But prior to that, you had the pleasure of walking into John Menzies or W.H. Smith's and seeing what was on the shelf. And I went in there every Saturday. Every Saturday, I got my mum to take me into town, and we would just see, was there a new Doctor Who book available? And if there was, I snapped it up. And only once did that my spidey sense fail me. And that's when I walked into a branch of an outfit called R.S. McCall's, a sort of news agency here in Glasgow. And they had a book. Back in those days, news agents had books as well as magazines. And there, sitting on the shelf, was the Dinosaur Invasion, which I had no idea existed. Oh. And there it was, just sitting there with a wonderful clock and that wonderful cover, which I can talk about later if you want. But there it was sitting, and I was totally unaware that this existed. I must have missed it when going out to town with my mum, and just happened to be local shopping. There it was, and having to ask her, can I have the money? I think it was 35p, might have been 45p, can't remember exactly. It was for that copy at the time, asking my mum for the money, and was able to purchase it then. So that probably, while not struggling to get it, as you're talking about, Brendan, that was probably the biggest surprise I had regarding purchase of a Dinosaur Doctor Who book. And yet again, Malcolm Hulke, Michael, you know this, pulls a wonderful stunt in that by taking an ancillary character like Butler and giving us a whole backstory about him with a scar on his face and how he rescued a child from a burning building, and people judged him as a result of that. And it's just wonderful.
Yeah, well, Michael's got a few bits he could say about that, but I've just got one clip from Michael's book here, which is in an interview. Mac told Philip Ince this was his favourite story, actually, of all of them, wasn't it, Michael?
Yes. Yeah, which is interesting because it might be one that people often wouldn't consider amongst being the most, the best, certainly on the televised version. But I think it's Malcolm's interest in the ideas, I think, behind the serial.
Yes.
And sort of people who, and this is a tendency we all have, the older we get, to look back to a kind of golden past, which obviously is always 40 years before the point at which you're chatting. So the golden past is now somehow moved to the 70s, whereas it used to be the 1950s. But it says in that interview, and there's a few interviews with Malcolm, I was able to find in the world of fandom. That's what he said. That though he thinks they're wrong in their thinking, he liked the story because that's how often a lot of people do feel left behind or left out by things changing, which was again something we all suffer from, the older we get. Must mention in my copy of the dinosaur invention, there's a whole list at the front of what's been available so far, and someone conscientiously ticked off all of them as they bought them, apart from the Doctor Who and the Daleks, but he's got everything else up to the 10th planet. So sometimes it's nice when you get hold of second-hand books and people have put their names in it, which kind of connects you. Sadly, nobody has it.
But yeah, there was that. I'd forgotten that. Thank you for reminding me, Michael. In the early Target books, there was that also available in the Target range, and then another section coming soon, so you would know what was coming next, an inside cover, and that would to whet your appetite.
Yeah, there's a list here at the back of the Doctor Who, the Doomsday Weapon, the Abominable Snowman by Terence Diggs, and then it says, and I'd never heard of this before, The Mounties, The Great March West by Terence Diggs, the first title in an exciting adventure featuring Rob McGregor of the Mounties. So Terence Diggs played a huge role along with Malcolm.
He ended up being editor, didn't he?
The Mounties always got their man, a bit like myself.
Sorry. So with the creation of Target, then when Universal Tandem, the publishers, wanted to sort of set up a children's list in '73. They then went to speak to Terence Diggs, and he was very enthusiastic and immediately offered to start writing, and he brought in Malcolm. So between them, Terence and Malcolm wrote a great deal. I mean, the first one, The Autumn Invasion by Terence, and then there's the Cave Monsters by Mac, and so on. So Terence actually wrote 63 titles for Target over 17 years.
Of varying, and we've got to be realistic here, of varying degrees of quality. Towards the end, Terence Diggs was fairly churning them out. Script to screen stuff, you know.
Was like John Yulden, who was going to come on, and I'm sure will come on another one. He was saying he would have picked the 5 Doctors. He's been reading the 5 Doctors, and Terence Diggs has a moment in it when the first Doctor's in that garden, and he adds the fact that this is just before the first Doctor dies. So basically he adds all that pathos to that scene in the 5 Doctors. And it's stuff like that Malcolm Hulke and Terence Diggs, Ian Marter, Barry Letts, David Whittaker, that they knew what they were doing. And I'm not convinced that these newer writers, number one, I don't think the content, the template's the same. The quality and the adventure's not there. I mean, they have to edit in those days because, as Malcolm Hulke said, didn't he, Michael? He had a grid, didn't he? And he, of the episodes you've got 150 pages in a book roughly, and he knows he's got to keep it going. And it was interesting, and I've got some of the slides there, but I'm sure you are better at talking about it. When he mentioned stuff like the difference between television and the book, and he said sometimes you should edit some of the action because that's better for television, so he spends more time on the character.
Well, the only recorded interview with Malcolm where you actually hear his voice is with Gary Hopkins, done a few weeks before he died, and he says that he sort of explains in quite a lot of detail to Gary, who's a young teenager, but he takes a lot of time to explain the art of writing novels as opposed to television script. So he says with a television script you do lots of toing and froing, but in a novel it'd be very annoying if you got half a page chapter and then another half a page chapter. So in a television you write like this, and in a book you write like this. So you read through the old scripts and then you just start at the beginning. You must expunge from your mind the possibility that they've seen it. So I think that's quite important. Obviously with the modern targets, and everyone's not seen them and probably watched them dozens of times, so I am struggling a little bit to understand the rationale for producing them. But he says you've got to describe things, but also the role of people. And you've got to try and get all this in early at the beginning without boring. So again, that's about how we sort of, the art of telling stories, really, and to draw people in and to explain what's going on as well to people who may not have.
And in those days we couldn't predict the future. Tomorrow's World might have mentioned it, but were we all going to get a video one day? Were we going to have BBC iPlayer one day? That was beyond us.
Holiday on the Moon. But
so the point is, when you looked at this sort of thing, it was decent of the writers to go, well, hold on a minute, this might be their only representation of this story, so we will reward them with greater context, bits that the program may have edited out a little bit. We'll bring some characters in to add nuance, and we'll take some other characters away. They actually truly respected the reading experience, and that it wasn't. And as you were kind of hinting at, John, Terrance Dicks, because he did so many. I think that was the issue. He had so many deadlines to fulfill that we all know. My bugbear with Terrance Dicks is Destiny of the Daleks.
Yeah,
it's so skimpy.
And mine too. It's just almost script to the page. It's not much done.
Yeah.
If I can go back just to a point Michael was talking about there, how clever Malcolm Hulke, Terrance Dicks were when writing these, because Doctor Who is very much an action-orientated series, and I don't know anybody else, but reading action sequences to me is boring. Reading about a fight happening, you can cover that in a sentence. Fine. I don't want to go a page after page about a car chase or a chase on a boat and all the rest of it. But what Terrance Dicks does, the bit in Planet of the Spiders, where all that goes on, he covers that very well. So otherwise that can be terribly boring. But essentially, what Malcolm Hulke has to do, therefore, and Terrance Dicks has to do, is you say, all that additional character stuff, that's what makes the book different from the television experience. And therefore, for me at the time, made it better because I was never going to revisit the television experience. We never knew, as you said, what was going to come down the line. But interestingly, to relate it back to what you said about current writers, when someone like Malcolm Hulke was writing, now we now know that Malcolm Hulke's political beliefs, that he'd hard left views about a whole range of things. He might have softened them over the years, but that's what we're led to believe. He was a member of the Communist Party. But in Dinosaur Invasion, he takes a group of people, the Operation Golden Age people, of which he presumably would have recognised himself, and people who he mixed with, wanted to turn back the time of the capitalist age to make it a more basic communal, human-like society, and he picks them to pieces. So in other words, he's more than happy to have a go at his own political standpoint, his own political beliefs, and have the courage to have a pop at them in the same way that modern people don't want to do that. What they want to do is, here's my views and here's what you should know. And that's what it fails today. And that was Malcolm Hulke's particular skill as a writer, in that he was prepared to challenge his own political beliefs, particularly there in the invasion, or the Dinosaur Invasion, as it's called in the book.
Yeah, but it was very good when you get quite right-wing characters, and he's very good at writing for them. some of the speeches
sympathetic too, but it's Trenchard or the politician, is it Glover in Grover, in the Dinosaur Invasion. You actually end up having more sympathy for him than you do for some of these left-wing, if you like, people who Hulke almost writes like as if they're crackpot and zealots. And he probably would have a whole lot more affinity with their views than with someone like Grover's.
I mean, one of his Avengers one, the first one, the Mauritius Penny, which he co-wrote with Terrance, which is about a sort of fascist coup under the guise of stamp collecting. There's a whole speech there by one of the sort of leaders of the New Rule, sort of denouncing. It actually sounds a bit like Nigel Farage, sort of denouncing everything that's happened in Britain since the war, and what you need is a new rule. So, but it's a very good speech. He's able to put himself into the mind of the character and write very well. So, his political beliefs are one thing, but it didn't stop him being a good writer.
Yes,
because not an agitprop, right? Not to put a caricature, but to try and enter into the mindset of these people, even though personally you might well disagree.
Yes.
Well, I will.
I wanted to mention about Targets. What I just remembered is someone told me they're all the same length. They're all the same length. Yeah. And so people say, well, how come the War Game, which was 10 episodes, is the same as the other? But that was Target. They wanted all the books to be a standard size, so they could be then put into boxes and sent off to the bookshops.
Although when you line them up on the shelf, there's some of them, like the Cybermen, looks a bit thicker and all the rest of it. They always
the demons were my favourites. Very thick. Yeah.
Yeah. So the thread, going down memory lane, so I'll bring a lot in. Brendan, for me, says Graham. For me, it was Claws of Axis with that fantastic original Achilles cover. I searched for ages, had to be that original cover. I never got around to saying, man, it was the Space War, particularly. The Space War. Obviously, I'm a Pertwee kid. And to try and find, because the Space War as a title isn't in the collection. Let's face it, it's Frontier in Space. So when they changed the title, I was intrigued. And it just sounded so exciting. Doctor Who and the Space War. And every time, I mean, how many people did this? You go to the shop, like you mentioned John Menzies and all the rest of it, and you go into the shop and you know, you've got so much pocket money and you raid. And sometimes W.H. Smith's, in our case, I don't know, it had a bit of a shelf for Doctor Who. That was it. And you raided it and you thought, oh yeah, that again. No. And you're flicking through and you're, wow. Now, some weeks you had a panic attack and you had to kind of really work your man, because you're going, I'm going to spend all my pocket money and all future pocket money, because look, it's got 4 books that I've never seen before and they're going to be grabbed by somebody. And of course, your mum goes, well, you know, this is my brother's going, when do I get a look in? I don't like this crap. So I remember that stuff like that. And in the end, I had to cheat and start ordering through W.H. Smith. And you pay 10 or 15p to get the bus. You go down the town Saturday morning. You and your mate, you get there, you race to W.H. Smith. I'm sorry, we're going there first. No negotiation. Yeah. W.H. Smith's. The trouble is, when you race to that shop for your order, is you go all the way to the shop inside, you go downstairs, in my case, back shelf. You're actually looking for it on the shelf because you can see the orders up there. And then you go, hello, Brendan Noble and Dr. Who. And then she goes and has a look and she goes, no, not in. And you go, oh, so the whole Saturday expedition's now been wrecked because of you. No, so sometimes, oh, I could see it on the shelf that I'd ordered and it was there. And you'd say, I've come for my order. And she, no, it's not there. And I'm thinking, it is there. And I'm not moving. Have a look again. Because they had these sheets in them. And so sometimes I think they were eclipsing another book. Yeah. Well, I'm sorry, I've spent my pocket money. I'm in the town. I want it now. And do you know what, John and Michael? If I did get the book I wanted, you know, the trophy is gained. I'm on the bus going back home. Did I read it? No. Did I just stare at the front cover and the back cover, stare at front cover, back cover, and I didn't want to start to spoil it. Oh God, it's weird. This,
as I say, that my memory was slightly different, as I say, because I had a ritual visit every week. Sometimes with parents, sometimes with my friend Tom, who's now an actor, and when we chat, we still talk about those days. But my parents were very, very well acquainted of those ritual trips into town just to make sure, is there a new one out this week? Is there a new one out this week? And, you know, once in every 4 weeks there was, or 6 weeks there was, and you were right, and you brought it back with you. But they couldn't understand how close I was, how important these books were to me, both in terms of buying them and keeping them and rereading them. Until one event, and if you bear with me for 30, 60 seconds, I tell this little story, that we all went on a family holiday, and we were going on the train all the way down to Scarborough or Blackpool, whatever it was, and taking our luggage with us. And luggage was at a premium because we had to make sure we had enough to last the week of the 2 weeks that we were going for. And my mum noticed that I had an extra little bag, suitcase with me, carrying that and struggling with it. She wanted to know what was in there. As in extra socks and underwear and all the rest of it. What I'd taken with me was, at that point, this was about 1976 or so, my entire collection of Target of books I'd taken with me on holiday in case the house was broken into by Target burglars who would leave the family silver and take my Target collection. So I was bringing it with me just in case we were broken into. But you know what happened? I managed to read at least half a dozen or more copies on the beach or wherever it was we were at that particular time. So it all came good in the end. Didn't have to buy magazines and comics. But that's how important. These were my crown jewels. These were my family silver. And I wasn't leaving the house for a week and leaving them behind.
Well, I just want to thank you, John Yulden. He's driving back home and he's listening to us because he's working at work today rather than being able to come on. But thank you for being generous. And of course, the Hoopits always say thank you. And so here we go. Yeah!
That was scary.
Yeah, they're now dead.
Just to get the back of the book, so you can learn a lot from reading the backs of books as well as the front. The Sea Devils was 30p, which in 1974.
well, you
My Ultron Invasion first one was 25 pence.
Yeah.
25 pence.
By the time we got to the Green Death at £1.50, so it was
this Sea Devils one's 40p. So what the hell's going on there? Yeah.
The Cave Monsters was also 25p as well. They were also much
I wonder how much that is now.
So I did want to show you also, because obviously it's memory lane this, and it's what got you into it, is the thing that got me, my favorite, I know it's hard to do, but if you had to really pin me down, and my favorite Doctor Who target book is the Cybermen, which is basically the moon base, of course.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, what's clever about this even now is we still don't have 2 of the episodes anyway. And obviously, I never saw any Troughtons. So this is all new material to me. Now, it does feel like a thicker book. I have to say, it really does. And to me, this was a ghost story for a kid.
Yes.
Now, look at that illustration, which proves the point. I know we can say the Phantom Piper and all that stuff, but wow. That is one of the best illustrations that grabbed me every time. I adored this story. I know we all know the moon base is great. I think those early episodes when we don't know why there's the oxygen's getting out and there's been a puncture to the space dome and the good old space plague and people are ill. Love all that stuff. And of course, when Jamie sees the Phantom Piper and that drawing and those claws and that silhouette, that's actually better than the TV there.
That's the thing I was just about to say, Brendan. Forgive me, but this is heresy probably. But if somebody had to say there was a burning fire and say, right, you have to lose the 2 episodes of the moon base or every single copy of that book, I'd keep the book because it's a far better representation of that story than look at it could be achieved on television. I don't want to get rid of any of them, but nonetheless, that's it. And Jerry Davis proves there was far better, and he does the same with Tomb of the Cybermen too. He was a far better Doctor Who novelist than he was a Doctor Who script writer, in my view.
Yeah, and here's just a quick example, folks, because you know this is the love of the books, isn't it? And he uses a simile straight away, like dangling puppets. They accelerated rapidly into the black of space, finally dwindling, gleaming spots of light. They're diminished into the stars. You know, that's lovely. And then the whole dome seemed to be shaken as the long gun-like probe started swinging in a wide arc like a scythe through a field of corn. You know, hello, this is introducing kids to reading. This is great stuff. And we haven't seen the show. So therefore, I can imagine that comparison. The illustration helps, but I have to say, as a story on the page, this really got me scared and I loved it and I will always love it. And I also remember I took it on holiday to read every night. Bit like you said, Graham, that your dad read it to you. Well, I read it to myself, but oh my God, you're under the covers with your torch and I'm staring at that picture. And the other thing is, John and Michael, because there were no videos or repeats proper, I used to sometimes set out all the target books and just stare at the covers because that was my Doctor Who.
Yeah. I would put them in order. Obviously, you had to be in order. We're Doctor Who fans, so you write these things out.
Did you do them alphabetically or by order? Or by author or a title?
Yeah. Well, no. By story. And back in those days, we didn't have an unearthly child, so it started with.
I was just thinking,
Alex.
I was just thinking, Brendan, you might have been disappointed when you actually got to see it because the Jerry's description there is very vivid and conjures up something quite immense, or a kind of Star Wars would be. And maybe when you get to see a black and white BBC thing of it, you think, oh, was that it? They just kind of moved into the air and that was it.
Fortunately, the time we came to see most of these, I was old enough to understand that this is the BBC's, the 1960s and 70s. So therefore, what they put on paper wasn't necessarily what's going to appear on screen. So I was prepared for that. So it didn't matter so much. But what these books gave us was that this TV show, when we initially saw, had a huge amount to live up to, because the vivid descriptions by authors like Malcolm and Terence and all the rest, just made these things just come alive. And if perhaps the bigger disappointment, because we know Doctor Who's like regarding effects and the creation of monsters, the biggest disappointment for me perhaps was in seeing that these characters like Quinn and the Squire in The Demons and Trenchard in the Sea Devils weren't as three-dimensional as they were on television, as Malcolm Hulke had and Terence Sticks in the books. That was the problem for me.
Yes. Now, Stephen Braddock here says, my first target was Carnival of Monsters. That is a great cover. I agree with you. And it's a great cover to put on the bed. I mean, it was unfortunate. Once you got too many, I couldn't have them all on the bed and just stare at them. I must have been like a freak. But I used to love staring at all the pictures because that's kind of our video. We were just staring at these scenes because some of them bring to life a scene. Now, obviously, that moment in Carnival of Monsters is not as good, obviously, with the CSO, but look at that picture.
And the good thing about the Carnival of Monsters, Brendan, is it, given the story, as soon as you finished it, you just jump back to the start and start again and read it as if you'd forgotten all about it.
See
what I did there?
Very good.
The cover of the Space War hasn't actually got the Doctor on it. It's got the ogre on, a very big ogre on.
Well, they did that, Michael. They didn't. Target for a while refused to have, if you were out, the current Doctor wasn't there. They didn't put them on the screen. Only later on that they put old Doctors on the covers, so that was it. The Space War was always one that foxed me because I thought Frontier in Space was a far better title than the Space War. The Target editor thought it was, would sell more books. I think Malcolm Hulke disagreed with them.
Well, I'm just going to tee up Michael anyway, because to bring Michael in, but actually Michael's book is there. Well, please mention the name again. It's gone out of my head. I'm sorry, but you say it.
Things are not always what they seem, which I'm sure you all realize is a quote from one of Malcolm's serials, the Faceless Ones.
So basically, just before you come back in, I just wanted to show he changed the ending to the Space War, didn't he?
Yes.
Which makes sense in the respect that we don't think they're going to be shown on video, and you wouldn't watch a whole season like we actually are now on Blu-ray collections and stuff. The trouble is, great idea. It does make it slightly problematic to me because I remember, like I said, I was desperate to buy this book. I buy the book, and then I thought, that's not the ending. That's not the ending.
Yeah, but it's only now that we would know that. But obviously, when he wrote it, very few people, not many people, would have recalled what actually happened 2 or 3 years before. So I maybe thought that was a better ending than the way it actually ended on TV.
I think it is, given what happened to Roger Delgado. I think it is. But Brendan, if you had troubles with the ending of the Space War, for goodness sake, don't try Exciting Adventure with the Daleks. That beginning is going to blow your mind.
Yeah, well, we'll call out the Daleks one, actually. David Whittaker, bless him, because David Whittaker, obviously, really, I can see what he was trying to do, but that book, from the viewpoint of Ian Chesterton, that was the one I struggled with the most as a kid. I just couldn't. And this is where I think RTD, and I'm trying not to do the toxic and current era, but this is where I think RTD has got it wrong with current Doctor Who. It is about the Doctor. And when that book by David Whittaker's written, and it's from the viewpoint of Ian watching the Doctor, I don't want that. Anyway, it's an interesting idea, but it didn't work for me.
No, I mean, in hindsight, but, it was a self-contained book, and that's why it was done. They didn't realize it would be part of a huge range. But interestingly, Malcolm Hulke does something similar. He reintroduces Joe Grant in the Doomsday Weapon as well, which is not her introduction. He chooses to do that. And by this point, the range is established. So
that's right. It gives her a whole sort of history about her.
Yes,
working for Diplomatic Corps, I think, and then she gets assigned to unit and so on. So a couple of pages about Joe, though, which doesn't bear much relation to the TV version. But they thought, well, I'll just, again, people aren't going to remember. And I think this is a better way of doing it.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Doomsday Weapons is a classic one. These are all excerpts from your research. Your book covers the whole of Malcolm Hulke, from the Avengers, Pathfinders, Crossroads, the whole blooming lot. So, that's the whole thing. There's sections on his writing, the scripts that didn't happen, all the rest of it. But there's little nuggets there about Target. And so the embellishments and stuff like that. So as you said, Mac also devotes several pages to the backstory of Captain Dent, the loyal IMC employee. You mentioned that one. You've mentioned Joe Grant, obviously, John. And then he had that little bit about the Time Lords, because obviously he wanted to set up that the Doomsday Weapon had been nicked.
That's right, yeah. So they had to kind of explain why they wanted to get hold of the Doctor to sort of chase after the Master and neutralize the Doomsday Weapon. Yeah, so it introduces Joe Grant as well at the same time.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the representation in the episodic version of the Doomsday Weapon, or Colony Space, to give it its television title, is nowhere near as good, because a twinkly BBC graphic and Time Lord looking a bit, But again, doing what he should be doing. He should be telling us and allowing our imaginations to work. I'm cool with the Joe Grant other introduction, even though the range had been established then. What it means, though, you get the Terror of the Autons coming a little bit later and contradicting this version, because this one came first. So, but you know what? In terms of the whole range, I'm prepared to put up with that. It doesn't bother me. It's all part of what the range was doing at the time, and more power to it. So, the David Whittaker total rewriting of the introduction of Doctor Who sits very comfortably with me, because I think he was just writing, as I say, a self-contained story with a beginning, a middle, and an end, without cognizance of the fact he would be writing one of many tens and hundreds of stories.
Well, and I will say, because I'm trying to kind of dovetail with what you're saying, David Whittaker, I'm not knocking at all, because David Whittaker with the Crusaders, and also, I mean, the Crusaders particularly, I'm impressed by, because, for example, if you just see, you know, again, he can't assume you've watched the series. He can't assume you've read the other one. So he does a nice quick summary, very decent, of the TARDIS adventures. They've been on a succession of planets, but then what I really like is, because, of course, you get into the brain of David Whittaker, who was part of the beginning, the origins of Doctor Who. And here on this page, you get the summary of Ian's character. Ian was now a deeply tanned bronze, his body trained to the last minute, no single trace remaining of the ordinary Londoner he had once been. And you get how he's evolved. The best one is of Barbara. The description of how Barbara has grown as a person. For what was, I'm halfway down the page, for what was totally new in Barbara grew and fostered inside the girl. She had always had that sense of mystery about her, even on Earth in her own time. She had always been very beautiful. Her mind had always reached ahead for answers and conclusions, while others struggled to grasp the situation. Now, life inside the TARDIS had given full rein to her air of mystery, and the adventures outside it had deepened her love for life in all its various forms. And he sets this all up about Barbara. I mean, that is, I mean, and by the way, and there's some beautiful illustrations to boot. You know,
quite a violent. It's quite a violent story. I wouldn't say it was sort of aimed at 8 or 9 or 10-year-olds. It's quite an adult sort of. You know, quite a lot of violence, isn't it? Some of it directed towards Barbara.
Michael, do you know what I will say, though, is I adored that book as a kid. I read it a lot, actually. I liked the whole, is it a boys thing? I loved the whole Crusades adventure, whether it's historically chaos, I don't care. I loved it, because you had the two courts and you had the go-between, and I absolutely, as a kid, I loved this one. Isn't that funny? Obviously, I'm an aggressive, violent person.
Yes.
Quite a sympathetic approach to Saladin, even though he's not played by an Arab actor. There's quite a sort of strong sort of sense that this is a dignified warrior, the equal of King Richard. So they're not portrayed as barbarians. I mean, both sides have people who are quite violent, but the two opposing monarchs are quite nuanced, I think.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. So, you know, I'm trying to get that balance there, because David Whittaker, those extra bits in a book, well done. Thank you. Because, you know, you could have just taken the money and, you know, added to your pension.
Which ultimately Terrance Dicks did. He took it and flew it like a thief in the night. But these early books, they were really, really bringing added value.
Well, one thing I should mention, of course, is the reason why we're able to sort of find them on the net. They're still relatively easy and not a vast cost. It's because they did sell in very large numbers. So there are, tens of thousands were reduced at the time. And they made Malcolm and Terence and other people a very nice income, I think. I think Malcolm was certainly earning probably more from his novels than he was working for the BBC. Because they sold, and also his Crossroads novels as well sold in.
Well, let me.
To be fair, just a second, sorry if you don't mind. To be fair to Terence and to Malcolm, but more so to Terence, I think it wasn't so much he was choosing to, if you like, churn these out, for want of a better phrase. It was that he was the only one available, and the speed of publication necessitated that he was doing a quick turnaround of some of these. So the late 70s, early 80s, he really was. So when you get to the Horns of Nymon, Destiny to Daleks, all this sort of stuff, he's required to do a quick turnaround. As these, I think, in most occasions, at that point, he was the sole target author. So later on, he gets better again because when others are sharing the burden. So it may well have been a question of timing for him then. So I just want to try to be fair to the man's memory.
Yeah. Now, Jack Dexter, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Target books were what made me a fan. I've still got my Doctor Who hardbacks, but there's the quandary. I'll put the Hoopits on in a second as a thank you, but is hardback or paperback, because you can't blend your collection. I remember the hardbacks on the primary school trolley. God, a hardback. I used to think, my God, how much money do you have? I was like, hardback.
Yeah, but you remember hardbacks in the library were always covered with that little bit of cellophane to protect them.
Yes.
I think you used to have to cover your textbooks at school, I think, we supposed.
Yeah, we did it with brown paper or old wallpaper, remember?
So my Hoopits will thank you very much, Jack. Very nice of you. They're happy. Yeah, they've got pocket money now. I'm just trying to keep in with the thread because it's the memories. It's always the memories. Julian Goodwin, The Crusaders is one of my favorites as well, Brendan. I didn't get that one until the 83 reprint. I know, I remember being gutted when I was desperate to get the Pyramids of Mars one for obvious reasons, and it was a different cover. When you got a different cover, you thought, whoa, what's going on? I want that other cover. Stephen Braddock, Graham, yes, it was so surreal seeing them on screen in the episodes and sitting a few chairs away from me. You're all talking now, aren't you, about who you've met and
Peter Halliday and Kevin Stoney, obviously.
Yeah.
Both terrific actors. I mean, Kevin Stoney was in everything. You're watching old TV, but Peter Halliday was a great actor as well, I think.
Sadako 24 here. To be fair, even Dix's novelization of Horns of Nymon is an improved take.
Sadako's quite correct. It's quite correct. Even Terence Dix, at his not very best, was still better than what Doctor Who was putting out late 79. So credit to Terence.
Now, has anybody read any of the recent ones? I'm curious to know what people make of the last 10 years worth of novelization.
I mean, I've heard that adds some nuance and ideas because they should, but the point is, it's just the fact that you just watch the blooming program. I mean, it's just I think there were over time to a degree. I'm saying that. Please, someone tell me. But John, horror fan rock, go on then, tell us the story there.
Horror fan rock is my favorite target book cover, without doubt. It just evokes that whole story to me. It is a beautiful cover, beautifully done by Jeff Cummins, who created that. Just only have to look at it. It's the ultimate base under siege story, and I saw it at the time, and then a year later, when it was released on Target Book, I went to my John Menzies in Buchanan Street in Glasgow, because I knew that the man himself, Tom Baker, would be there signing copies of Target books. And I went in there earlier than anybody, got my copy of Horror Fang Rock, which was on the shelf, just waiting for me, and queued. I was second in the queue. Went up the back of the store. The man himself arrived in full Doctor Who costume. Lift doors open, out he came. Sat at the desk, first person went forward. I'm standing there. I must have been about 12. We just lost. Leela had just gone in Invasion of Time. It was just the end of that season 15. Standing there with my copy of the Horror Fang Rock, ready to eagerly read this, and I'm called forward to meet the man himself. I hand over my book. He begins to sign it and says those magical words to me, "Would you like a jelly baby?" And I fainted. I actually passed out. My next memory is up at the back being fanned by a copy of probably of the Radio Times and a lady who worked in John Menzies, holding my book in one hand, she is, and holding the jelly baby in the other and saying, "It's all right, son. It's all right, son. You got your book and it's signed, and he saved you your jelly baby." There was I.
Have you still got it, John?
I still have the book, still signed, still put away safely.
You've got the jelly baby.
Yeah, I still have this. The jelly baby was consumed then because I needed the sugar to recover from fainting fit. But that was a
great story.
How much this book and that man meant to me that I lost consciousness. And apparently Baker asked, she said, "Don't worry," the doctor said, is he all right and what have you? But I had to let the queue continue. And then I was called, my mother was called, and I was sent home. But there you go. The Horrifying Rock still was signed to Tom Baker, 1978 to John, and an Eating Jelly Baby. So Tom somewhere, if you're out there, Tom, listening to this, 91 years of age, I'm the guy who fainted in front of you in 1978. There you go.
and this is what I mean. And the books blur with everything else. I mean, I loved The Green Death as a kid, watching it, the TV program. When it came to the book, there was this section, and you've picked up on it as well, Michael, which is Malcolm Hulke, bless him, gave us the viewpoint of the maggot. And then the giant maggots are one of the things that the kids really, I mean, I thought they were in it more in my memory. And then here it says, and then suddenly the egg cracked open. The maggot lay exhausted from its efforts. Then it sniffed sharply. It was experiencing a new source of energy, oxygen in the air around it. It wriggled its little body and realized it was quite strong. It also realized it was very hungry. And then it now had to find its own food. I mean, honestly, I give so much credit to a writer. They've all got time deadlines. They were still writing for the program too, and other stuff. They were very busy writers. And he adds those two little paragraphs that actually added to my experience of the book, because he adored the giant maggots and he was bringing an extra bit in it, because actually they're not in it much.
Should be a good point, talking about bringing in new characters. The introduction to Dinosaur Invasion and the misadventures of Shuggy McPherson.
Oh, yes.
I think he got that character. That was based on one of his Crossroads characters.
Yeah.
Mary McPhee.
Oh, yeah. So he kind of goes, this character goes down to London, I think, for a football match. He gets left behind by his mates. The next thing you know, he wakes up and London's surrounded, taken over by dinosaurs. And he doesn't make it through to the final chapter, let's put it that way.
No, he doesn't. But that again, that's what Hulke did. And you're right, Brendan. To think about that section in The Green Death, I'd forgotten about that. That this squirming, disgusting creature is given a character by Malcolm Hulke. And for those few lines, you have an absolute sympathy for this little thing bursting out of the way. It has life, it has purpose, it has being. And that's fantastic. That's someone going away really thinking about his craft. And I think that's wonderful.
Well, I saw it in the thread as we were talking, and if I find it, please tell me. And you were saying that the Planet of the Spiders, whoever it was your best cover, and I remember that because it is very distinctive, and I have to say, it's the only time I've plagiarized, because John, you know, you've worked in the private primary sector. When I was a primary school kid, you know what I used to do? Sometimes if I had to write a story at home, I would copy bits from Planet of the Spiders. You know, the Buddha. I went to a Catholic primary school and I was doing Buddhism. And I was I thought the prayer bit and the incantations was part of and Sister Jane will be really impressed with that. Well, she never knew how. She didn't see the Doctor Who connection because clearly she didn't watch it. But I was basically reprising Planet of the Spiders all the time.
Yeah, shocking. I have to say, though, that's not the original Spiders cover. There's a bit.
No, it isn't.
The one, which was the one I have, which was Pertwee facing Sarah in that lovely stripy jacket with a spider on her back. And down the bottom, more excitingly, Pertwee morphing into Baker. Wonderful.
Yes, and you're quite right to say that, because that was the version. This version you can see here is the version I managed to buy, but I wanted the one you're talking about.
I got it.
Because it is true, though, John, that it was in some ways. I'll get to that. That you look at some of these covers, you've got the Doctor, you've got the representation of the monster or a scene, and that's all you've got. I mean, let's face it, with no videos, as we keep saying. And look at these ones, for example, in particular, the 10th planet I found rather vivid. The Seeds of Doom, yep, we all know that scene. The Crusaders has got the whole blend of everything. But
except the Crusaders, just go back a shade, Brendan.
Yeah.
The only thing wrong with that is that's a Three Doctors version of Heartfelt, not a Crusaders version of Heartfelt.
Yes, yeah, they did do a bit of that, didn't they? So yes, you've got your blends here, but which one was I going to talk about? That's oh, the photograph. No, the photograph one of Terror of the Autons. When there's the original, that's the one I got, the photograph one.
The original.
You know, I wanted that one that's there.
That's the one I got.
And I kind of liked these cartoon aspect ones where you got a scene within a scene.
Yeah.
And the 10th planet does that as well. And actually, the 10th planet is one of those where, if I just get myself in order, bear with me, everybody. The 10th planet, again, it's the cartoon on the back, because this is the regeneration. And I couldn't get the 10th planet, struggled to find it. And this is when I was at my grand's, and my grand's friends, they obviously went to jumble sales together. And I remember she got it out of her handbag. You know, in the days when grandmas had the biggest handbags in history. And then my gran had this handbag that kind of was the size of a settee, and her hand would go in, you know, like that claw at the fairground where you always missed it.
Her Omega's claws.
Yeah. And my gran's hand would go into this bag. And all of a sudden, this creased, wrinkled book came out. And we're not allowed wrinkled books in Brendan's collection. Oh,
I thought you said creased and wrinkled. You're talking about your grandma's hand.
How dare I? No. She'd regenerated. So basically,
can I mention that cover, that back cover? I distinctly remember that, because to my mind, the Simon was wearing a pair of Levi's or chino underneath at his bottom, rather than what we come to expect, because it just seemed odd at the time. But the biggest disappointment for me when I came eventually to see the 10th planet, and they changed this when they brought the Mondas Sidemen back, the Mondasi Sidemen back, is that headset didn't do that thing. You know, that was the biggest disappointment, because I think that's an iconic image. These are word too often these days, but that is an iconic image of that Cyberman. Beautiful.
Oh yeah, and just to be presented with that, you know, my grand's friend said, "We found this, Brendan. Have you got it?" And I was like, "No." Now, and I remember my head going, "Well, I am grateful," and I was, and I did say thank you. But I remember going, "Oh, but it's a rubbish cover because it's crinkled and everything." And of course, how you have to compromise. You've been given, you know, this rich treasure that you've been looking for, but it's not in pristine condition. Later on, Brendan gets a second copy, but I do treasure this one because my gran and her best friend found it, and they also found me the Web of Fear.
I think they put an illustration on the back cover as well as the front, which is fairly unusual. I think all my ones here are just plain covers on the back with it.
Well, that's what I mean. You get the added
they do something similar with the Three Doctors, the original Three Doctors cover, where they have a lovely picture of the Troughton Doctor being walked along by a jail guard. It's lovely. I don't know if you've got that available, Brendan, because the Three Doctors is actually one of my favorite covers. The original one with Omega's claws, a bit like your grand's hands going into the bag, and then, but I say on the back you've got Troughton being this one, but on the back of that Three Doctors cover, you have Troughton and a jail guard as a back illustration too. Look at that! Isn't that cover just? As a child, you look at that and you think, I can't wait to read this book.
Yeah,
that's a cover doing its job.
It's a cover. I think the vision. I mean, this is what I mean. Skeletor, Achilles, Jeff Cummins, they really brought it alive, but especially this, because it was kind of almost comic strip. You got bits of the scenes, that you never thought you'd see again. And it just visualized it. So you could actually, I'm sorry, I'm so tragic. I used to play the Doctor Who music in my head and stare at the book. And I'd actually have the book coming towards me, a bit like the tunnel sequence. There are issues here.
I did that.
Because you were basically making the program come back. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is what you were doing. And
kind of recreating it in your own head, weren't you, I think?
But the thing is, Michael,
sometimes better than the original. When you actually got to see the original, you might be a little bit, your version in your head might have been more visual than the actual.
This is when but Michael, in the 80s, we then hit a big problem as Target lovers because they decided to do photographs. And I remember I was so good. Can you imagine the Visitation front cover, which was, I think, the first Peter Davison one? If it had the pterodactyls done in that style, I mean, for God's sake, and a rat and all that.
I saw the cover of the Visitation for the first time at my very first, at the time, Doctor Who convention I went to, which was in Birmingham. It was a panopticon run by Duas in 1982. And that was I think it was one of the first Davisons introduced. The reason we were told by John Nathan Turner at that time and then subsequently was that they couldn't do a proper and good and authentic representation of Peter Davison's face. So they had to opt for photographic covers. Fine. But look at those two as an example. Is it beyond the wits of Target or W.H. Allen at the time not to have found a better photographic representation of the Doctor? That's just that. The one they've used for the Visitation there is just a publicity shot. It's not even part of the action of the Visitation. As you said, well, as we've seen now, all the photographs were taken on set or on location at the time. It would have been so easy to have found something much better than that. At this point, I think they're beginning to take us for advantage. They knew they'd a set audience, we'd spend the money, we'd take it. And they were flying like thieves in the night. So that was, but I think, however, I'm not sure about this. Maybe you can let me know, Michael or Brendan or somebody in the thread. Did they go back and reprint those with artwork covers to make up for it?
I don't know. I'm thinking that obviously the publishers, whoever was it still Target or was it somebody else who'd taken
W.H. Allen, W.H. at that point. Yeah.
Right. So maybe they were just cutting back. Why are we paying this artist to do this cover?
Yeah.
A lot of cheap or free.
We're taking the money and running. We don't know about it at all. The excuse we were given was they couldn't capture Davison's likeness, which is fine. But I don't understand that. But do we know, Brendan? Did they go back and redo these later with pictures, drawings?
I don't, and there's a lazy reason, John. If I knew, I would tell you. But I actually think, when you get the copy, even I hate them. Do you know what? It stopped me reading them. I'm sorry, there is a halt in my Target reading. I bought the books. They go in my collection. Obviously, there is the other issue, John and Michael, that it was on TV and I was starting to video record.
Yeah, VHSs of these we did. Yes. Yeah.
And I think this is the issue. I thought, I'll keep the collection going. The photograph
killed the Target cover.
Yeah.
And now, Hasler Scott, you're being extremely generous, and I have to say that. Now, he's offering to be even more generous if I dress like Shooty Gatwa. Well, excuse me. So, on which stream? John does the Sunday one with me. He does a dance. We should have... John will do dress up. Can
I do Shooty in his knickers then?
Yeah. If he does that, do I get the money? Yeah, John, I like this.
You can put the $10 in my knickers.
So, yeah, John does the... So anyway, thank you very much, Hasler Scott. Regular feature on the books would be great. It is in mind, Hasler Scott. I am an English teacher. I'd be a fool not to. Short shows, one book at a time, something like that. Yeah. But give us your ideas, because obviously, that sort of thing. Recently started collecting these. Also, I will donate $50 to the Sphere if Brendan does the final show in the Shooty cosplay. Or which one, Hasler, out of the many, many, many? Am I a Barbie doll? But thank you very much, nonetheless.
The multicoloured swap shop.
People are loving the chat. They are loving the memories. Of course they should, because we're all able to go, oh, yeah, I did that. Oh, no, I did that differently. Farsight, I loaned a friend of mine my copy of The Invasion. It came back all wrinkled. Oh, get the police. I came back all wrinkled because he turned the front cover. How dare he? I tell you what, people did that. That my Asterix collection that happened. Asterix collection, all pristine. Tintin, all pristine. my uncle, I'm not going to name him, he's in Australia. My uncle said, "Can I have Asterix in Spain?" Because he loved the humor. Oh, of course you can, uncle. Give it to him. The next day, it was creased. Creased. Oh, Farsight, I feel your pain, Farsight. I really do. That is killer.
But I mean, books, to me anyway, they have like memories of. I even used to write in them the date I bought them in the 70s, like Penguin Modern Fiction. But also I've got books my father had from the 1940s. And he also used to write, probably where I got the habit from, he used to write the date in when he bought these Raymond Chandler novels in the 40s. And I've also got some of his John Wyndham classic Penguins from the 1950s, which as he's no longer with me, I like to hang on because they have, emotional memories. I think that's what's coming across with our friends on the chat and our colleagues here today, that books mean something. They're not just the text, they also have memories, and you remember where you were, what you were doing, your family, and everything else in your life.
Tangible. And just as you come in, John, Eye of Horus, The Visitation was revisited with an illustration in 1992. So that was 24. Yeah. So there you go. That puts us in a pickle, doesn't it? Because you think, do I get it?
I'll let you do this first.
Yeah, sorry. No, Farsight, people have been very generous, and I didn't do the Hoopettes last time. I must do the Hoopettes now, so I thank you. The Target novels were all reprinted with covers by Alistair Pearson, and they've tried also to echo this. I saw the other day a copy of Rose, the Chris Eccleston story, and they've done it very like the Target style. The trouble is, you can get your I'm not knocking people from reading, because obviously, hello, but I find it problematic, as in, what's the urge to do it now? However, having said that, it is the bug of reading. But thank you very much, both. Oh, they'll be happy with their tea tonight. Go on, John.
Yeah, it was just something, you've not put it up yet, but in the chat, Paul Richards mentions the Zarbi. I don't know if you can find that to put up on screen yet. I love the Zarbi novel. Now, here's one negative from today. The Zarbi, the Bill Sutton novelization of that story, is the one I really, and to this day, struggle with. I find real difficulty enjoying. Now, you come to see the Web Planet as a 6-part story. You know why? Because it's something, you have to be really, really committed to watch 6 parts, certainly on the trot. But the book itself, I also found hard going. I don't know why. And it's fascinating to hear Paul say in the chat there that he loved it. And it just shows you that there's always something for someone who sees something different in something you don't. But it's the one Target novel that I always have difficulty with.
Do you know what, John? It's really weird. It's really weird, because I agree with, who was it? Paul?
Paul Richards.
Paul Richards. I know I was on holiday, and I bought this book, before the holiday, the night before you buy the book, and you put it next to your trousers and you make sure it doesn't crease. I remember taking the Zarbi on holiday, because I think my Zarbi book has a little bit, sacrilege, of suntan lotion on it. Whoa. And it's marked the pages. So killer stuff. But the Zarbi, I have to say, I was in another world. I remember that holiday distinctly, you two, because I had an Enid Blyton. I found it quickly. It was the Magnificent Seven. Well, not the Magnificent Seven. What were the Secret Seven? Secret Seven. And there was a Secret Seven mystery. I grabbed that from Pileski's bookshop nearby, and I got the Zarbi as well. And on a holiday, I had the mystery of the Enid Blyton, and then I had, because it has illustrations in the Zarbi one as well. I think I remember seeing the Monoptera. And what's that little
very odd illustration in the TARDIS, because it looks as though they're sitting around the desk, operating the TARDIS. It doesn't look anything like the console. It's a very odd illustration.
Yeah, so I don't know if like you say, John, it's a blurring of so many things. Number one, did somebody buy you it? The adventure getting it? Or in my case, I remember relaxing on holiday, just being in another world.
Yeah, Vortis probably.
Yes, this is it. I was probably at Pontins. I mean, we were always in Pontin. We went Continental, and I went to the Web Planet.
I'm sorry to cut in again. I want to go back to the chat, if I may.
Yes.
EOH editorial mentions a Cave Monsters illustration about Dr. Quinn sitting down talking to the Silurian. He's right. It's a fantastic one. There's also another illustration there where Lurie kills Quinn, and as he falls back, it's a fabulous illustration.
It's a bit like Parkinson interview.
Can you hold it up again, Michael?
Put it up again, Michael.
Oh,
Michael.
Yeah, it's Lurie.
Michael Parkinson show with. So
it is, yeah, it's like Lurie's shop to IKEA. Who knew?
Yeah, I know I mean, it's classic. I mean, it's beautiful stuff, I have to say. And oh yeah, shall we just have an interim before we just have our concluding thoughts? So people in the thread, give us your final memories of your favorite book, your worst book, the one that you've got on the shelf, but that sort of thing. Just to round off, and I'll just give you a little treat for a moment, which Boomer Doug made for us for actually the launch for Michael's book, and it's in the advert now. Here we go.
This has changed before, it will change again.
Yeah, the gay old thing, aren't you?
Are you on the gang too? Which car?
I know who you are. I know who you are.
Good grief. It's a Stegosaurus.
He's a flying beastie!
That creature has an egg in its position, Brigadier. And a brain about the size of a walnut.
Scatter! I've brought some old friends along to meet you.
Without him, the whole place would blow up.
Hello. Are you a Silurian?
So thanks to Boomer Doug. He always does me a favor. He has his own channel. Please give him a like. So there you go. We just have another little advert for your book, Michael, as well. Because
thanks, Brendan. The postal orders in the post.
Yay!
Because obviously we're doing targets. Malcolm Hulke did some of the better ones, I have to say, and he also did more than Doctor Who. And so there's a kind of marrying of different things here. What else is in your book, of course, if everybody's just intrigued by Malcolm Hulke, but have only met him through Doctor Who?
So, I mean, I go back to some of his early work in the 50s when he started writing for Armchair Theatre. So that was a regular drama series on Sunday evenings on ITV. And they explored, it's a shame that no TV now does one-off single dramas anymore, that it's all endless nurses or police procedurals, so the art of the single play has vanished. But
yes.
The Armchair Theatre did hundreds of editions produced by Sidney Newman, so that's the link. Sidney Newman then went off to the BBC. So that's one thing I talk about. Also, I talk about Pathfinders in Space, a children's science fiction film series in the 1960s, 61, which is very popular, and they kept on bringing it back and asking Malcolm and his writing partner Eric Page to produce more episodes. So in those days, didn't have like a year's worth of running and endless layers of bureaucracy to get a TV series on. You just thought, okay, we want 6 more episodes, please. Can you do them next week? And we'll start filming. So TV seems to be much more flexible than in those days. And also explore the Avengers, and then also his written work, contributing to the history of Doctor Who and the making of Doctor Who, writing about how you write television, TV, script writing. So there's a very large range, I think, of Malcolm's work, which I hope that people will come away thinking he was a Doctor Who writer, but he was a lot more than that.
So that's on Lulu to order. How much is that? Just so everybody knows. If they're
about 20. I think it's about £21. About plus postage. Yeah.
Yep. Fair few hundred pages there.
Thanks for everyone who's bought it, and I hope people find it of interest.
Well,
just as an aside, to think that there is life beyond Doctor Who, I watched a 1962 episode from a science fiction series called Little Lost Robot, which you can find very easily on YouTube. And it's based on a short story by Isaac Asimov. So it's interesting to see how science fiction, which isn't Doctor Who, was treated in this story of a robot which has gone rogue. And so they're trying to, after 21 robots, there is one robot that won't obey human beings, but they have to try to work out how to trap it and how to get it to come forward. So it's quite a nice little hour-long science fiction story, which I commend to everybody who's not seen that kind of era of science fiction before.
Right. Well, I will also bring in our thread because I invited them to share some memories. So here we go. Pete Merritt hated the covers with the McCoy logo on them. They look dreadful. I thought it was only me.
No, very true. Very true.
Yeah.
It was as though it was, stuck on with glue. It wasn't for many of those book covers. It didn't integrate. It was almost like black at the top. Yeah.
And of course, we're the same with Blu-ray. The argument is if they change the Jodie Whittaker logo, we need to stick to something consistent. We're all purists with our collections, and so you have your Doctor Who logo there, and you think, can we please stick with that? But they didn't, as you saw with the 80s ones, and then it starts. I don't know.
That's marketing for you. That's marketing, isn't it? Yeah, they've got to go current brand image.
But they don't think of the collectors here. Stephen Braddock, it reminds me of holidays. Always read Ron on the way down to Margate or Southend. Weren't we lucky? I have to say, I would not swap once my 70s childhood. I think the balance was just right. Lots of going out and about, no panic about people being dodgy, lots of reading, great telly, not too much telly. Remember, they also used to talk about Square Eyes, and every kid now is on a mobile phone all day.
It was so easy. I just sat there on my chopper or watched Doctor Who.
What?
I just sat in my chopper and went cycling.
I think I had a grifter.
Just 5 gears.
I had a grifter.
A lot less fear around. People have become very fearful. I mean, I remember, I tell this story that when I was 15 in 1970, I took my brother, who was 12, up to London, and we went to see Creedence Clearwater Revival play at the Albert Hall. So we travelled up to London by train, went to the concert, and then came back to our home on the same evening with and with no mobile phones. And so there seemed to be a lot less fear, and in some sense, a lot more freedom then for children.
A lot. I was just unlucky that because I was in Middlesbrough and the Longleat 83 was in Wiltshire, that if there wasn't, I got it in there, ka-ching. There wasn't just less of a train connection, my mum and dad would have let me go with my mate. But there were just too many train connections that seemed problematic. But my mum and dad in 1983 were going, it's doable. Yeah, I mean, that world's gone now. Now, Eyes of Horus, evocative times. Ultimate for you was the Space War. Thank you very much, Malcolm Hulke. I love it. I love it. It's a great companion to the actual TV series, that one, I think. Pete Merritt. His favourite is the Sea Devils. Well, yes. Least favourite, Photo Doomsday, the photograph. The story didn't go far. Let's have a look at the other ones here. Stephen Braddock. My favourite, now, I'm assuming you're going to say it's the John version of the Three Doctors, that one. It was so epic. 3 Doctors against the ultimate evil Time Lord. I mean, brilliant drawing. We haven't mentioned the Yeti ones, the Web of Fear and the Abominable. The Abominable Snowmen I did read at school, I remember. And that, again, you're in a Catholic school and you're doing all this Buddhism.
Yeah, can I bring it back to school for a second? Because I had a fabulous English teacher at school, long since passed, Mr. Cairns. I've mentioned one teacher before, I'll mention another one. Now, Mr. Cairns, he's my English teacher, and he got me interested and made Shakespeare come alive for me. Fabulous English teacher. But he was very down on my addiction to Doctor Who books. He thought it was trash. He didn't think it was worth it. And he didn't get this idea that, as we do nowadays, that all reading is good reading because, it's an introduction to something better. As a teacher, I always tell parents, don't buy them Harry Potter, buy them a comic, and introduce them and work them up to something a bit more meaty. But anyway, he thought it was trash. Until I happened to, the copy I had, the book I had with me that day, just happened to be Christopher Bidney's Castrovalva. And I challenged him, I said, take it and read it. And he came back that night. It wasn't a particularly standout book, but he came back and he said to me, there was a quote in there which I thought was fabulous. And I always remember this. He said it was the character of Ruther saying to Ruth, the Shardavans saying to Ruther, if we could eat your memories, we would feast indeed. And he said that was worthy of Shakespeare. And I always remember saying, I'm doing the right thing. These books are not trash, as he found out for himself. And I thought that's a nice little memory again.
Yeah, and Paul Mabley up in my part of the region has said, oh, you got to give a call out to Ian Marter. Ian Marter, I ain't forgotten. Now, here's my example, just to be fair here. Obviously, I'm a creature of the 70s, so without the video, it's the Sontaran experiment, which we actually reviewed not long ago. The Sontaran experiment, oh my God, that cliffhanger. And of course, we all remember when Sarah thought it's Lynx. And of course, he brought this alive. I'm not going to read it all now, but I'm putting it on screen so you can see. This is the famous moment. And Ian Marter, bless him, great writing, brought it alive.
Yeah.
And I'm going to the bottom. All at once, the gaping oval panel was filled by a squat, lumbering shape like a monstrous puppet. The Hoopettes are going to go mad. Its domed, reptilian head grew necklace out of a massive, hunched shoulders. Each trunk-like arm ended with I can't say the word there, talons, and was raised in anticipation towards her. The creature began to lurch down the ramp on thick, stumpy legs, the rubbery folds of its body vibrating with each step. Mean eyes burned like two red-hot coals amid the gnarled, tortoise-like features, and puffs of oily vapor issued from the flared nostrils. As it approached her, the creature uttered a raucous grasp of satisfaction. We all know this bit, don't we? Ah, the female of the species. And then she says Lynx. I mean, if you haven't got the video, Ian Marter has brought the whole blooming thing alive.
You don't need the video as good as it is. You don't need the video. It wouldn't be a Target retrospective also without mentioning Ian Marter and what he did with Enemy of the World. He used used that sweary word in Doctor Who books for the first time. And I remember he used the word, am I allowed to say it? B, blah, 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 blah. I don't want to say it out loud. Use the B word. And I remember using that at the time to say to people, see, look, these books aren't for children. That was my big thing at the time. The fact that you had sweary words in Doctor Who, but the very fact Ian Marter had so fit to use it showed how he stood out from other authors of the time, because he really embellished, even more so sometimes than Mac Hulke had done. He took it and ran away with it. And I remember his version of the Rebus operation was lengthy, quite small print, and really took that to a different place completely. And much missed Ian Marter, not only for being Harry Sullivan, but being a very, very good Target author.
Well, so there you go. I mean, I haven't forgotten him, because he remember, and you can't overdo this. We didn't know when we bought the book. We thought we were capturing the kind of the video element of it back, because we were never going to see it again. And when you got to that cliffhanger, which every kid of their time is a famous cliffhanger, a bit like the one in Time Rory as well, and to have it come alive so you can enjoy it under your duvet and you can sit there with your torch. On that front, though, John Yulden, by the way, is, thank you very much, $1.99. Admit it, John, you still cycle ride that chopper.
Listen, just so John knows, around the streets and bars of Glasgow, John and his chopper are well known.
Well, Kez the Drone says choppers were bloody dangerous once you got a front reel wobble.
No, listen, but there was a chopper and there was a chipper. Chippers had 3 gears. Choppers had 5 gears. You knew you were in a chopper.
Remember the space hoppers that people bounced up and down on? And then
I could never coordinate those. I always fell off.
Then someone came up with a Super Ball which you bounced and then went into the stratosphere and never saw it again.
That's right. When they multicolored, they were all different colors.
Yeah.
Those Super Balls, they were like rainbow colors throughout.
What's funny is when you mentioned your teacher and you know, it's almost the snobbery about the Doctor Who books. And it's funny because, you know, everybody knew in my family, Brendan's got all these Doctor Who books. And it was a little bit sniffy because, oh, Doctor Who books. I mean, Brendan's got 200 books on his shelf of this, that, and the other. Oh, what is it? Doctor Who. Oh, and you think, no, but you've got a kid who is reading like mad. And as I said, I'm learning the vocab, prefixes, suffixes. I'm learning amazing content. My imagination is on fire. I mean, honestly, it works so well. And like I said, people go on about the Harry Potter hype and all the rest of it. That was only 7 or 8 books. John had 100 odd.
Yeah, and that very much influences my not pedagogy as such, but my how I taught reading and how I used to get young people to read. Unless they were reading stuff that was going to radicalize them, I treated all reading as good reading, whether it was a TV listings magazine like the Radio Times, or a comic, or a piece of graphic novel, whatever it is, any of these things. I treated all reading, in terms of parents encouraging their children, to be good reading. And that was based on my time, that what you call is people thinking, well, that's not proper reading, that's for children, that's silly, that's trash. And if people had just taken the time and effort to go and read one of them for themselves, as ultimately my English teacher did, they would see, no, it's more than that. And although it's not, they'll never win prizes for literature, as gateways into broader and better literature, they were second to none.
I think when I was a child, we used to go and stay with our grandparents, as you do, in the holidays, and they had lots of books in the 1930s. So being a big reader, I read through lots of them, which is stuff I don't think I'd even bear, like Dawnford Jade, which is like sort of appalling right-wing propaganda. But they had good stories in them, so I just read them things for the stories, I think, rather than being too bothered about what the political sort of message was.
Yeah. Michael, you talk about 1930s. Interestingly, I read, as a young boy, I read Agatha Christie too. And again, that was seen as, if you like, third rate or, second league, whatever. But absolutely not. There's a craft that's, she follows the formula, but there's a craft in there, and as a gateway to other stuff. It's brilliant. It's great.
Well, just to conclude for all of us in different ways, this is my conclusion. Then John, you mentioned the Squire bit in the demons, and then I'll come to Michael. But this was my prized book, like I said, that my gran and her best mate found for me. But the reason why, let's face it, is this is the legendary regeneration of William Hartnell. And so to me, to read the description of how he ages gradually over the book is fantastic, because I feel as I'm living history of something I missed. And so on that first page where it says page 10, it talks about, in that second paragraph after the middle, worse still, the doctor seemed to be aging rapidly. He was beginning to stoop a little, and his absent-mindedness had increased to the point where he did not seem to recognize his 2 companions. And then you jump to the other page, and then as it goes down, he says he's been more snappy and all the rest of it. In spite of his age, the doctor had sharp eyes and seemed almost able to read their minds. You just get, sorry, and there was one last little bit. By nature a kind man, the doctor had grown irritable and dictatorial of late. He didn't like to be crossed by one of his companions. So, I was grabbing Doctor Who history, and that was down to my gran and her best mate Madge, and they got that.
Handbag.
Yeah. Now, John, while I just switch to your demons, and now if I've got the wrong bit, I apologize. Is it that prologue where that
no it's not, it's way into the story. It's all about Squire Winstanley, and he gets his full title in this book. And again, what Malcolm Hulke does here is what we mentioned earlier on. He takes a whole chapter. Barry Letts does this. Barry Letts copies what Malcolm Hulke has done. He takes a whole chapter to write a character out. So from beginning to end, this chapter, it's only about 3 or 4 pages long, that the Squire, who we've seen fall under the influence of the Master, as do most of the villagers, in this chapter, he wakes up having had a headache, I think, and takes a tablet, an aspirin to take it away. And it charts his progress through the course of the day. And then at the end of it, he's dead. He's gone. This man, his life has been lived, and he's gone. Now, in the television series, it's all over in a matter of seconds. And it's done with a typical BBC 1970s effect. But what Barry Letts does is, again, give this character 3 dimensions. He gives him a complete sadness for when he's lost, because he's fallen, again, like Trenchard, under the influence of the Master, and his life and his death means something. And again, it's all in the writing. For a young person reading that, to put flesh on the bones of a character, and if you had have watched The Demons or remembered seeing it, and then you come to read that, it just gives more meaning to the visuals you had on the television. And that's what proper storytelling does. And Barry Letts wasn't an author as such. He wasn't a writer. He was a television professional. He wrote some scripts. He produced things. What he does there is just make it come alive, especially for a young reader. And I have to say, I've not read this book for a few years now, but I have no doubt whatsoever that even at my age now, which is that book would still keep me riveted.
And I have to say, I think a lot of people are going to go into their lofts and get their books out, because I have to say, just talking tonight and having some of them in front of me, I'm thinking, do you know what? I want to connect with that memory again as well, because as we know, reading does a lot of things. I may know the story. I want to reconnect to where I was and all the rest of it. Now, obviously, Michael, final thoughts on you on the targets and also on your book there. Just
I think I think tonight we celebrated the joy of text, haven't we? The joy of reading. And that's the way that reading can connect you with a sort of a different universe, or with the Doctor Who, but also in science fiction or in novels generally. So it's important, I think, to understand our humanity and see it explored by different writers, different authors, in all these wonderful books we've discussed, and the whole range of human endeavor. And we hope that people will continue to read in the future. There won't be a lost art, which would be catastrophic, I think, in terms of our culture.
So if you do fancy the new Target books, all to the good. I'm not knocking that. I just feel as though there's a frisson that's missing, because you were stealing something from a lost time, really, when you got the books before. And just before I leave, Dreadnought, sorry. Well, I seen someone on Facebook that they didn't like this new episode, and she was called hateful and all. Dreadnought. We have tried desperately tonight to try and go nostalgic and to try and forget about the looks, whether the Rani's back, all those things. We've tried. Hopefully, most people have had a comfort blanket of nostalgia tonight, and we can deal with the Eurovision episode when it happens on Saturday. But in the meantime, we've had a lovely, and remember.
Can I just say, Paul, I'm going out now to see if I can get those clackers off the telephone wire, which are still dangling outside the telephone wire outside here. I think they were mine.
Very, very dangerous. Look, for every Interstellar 803rd song contest that's going to be problematic for people, pick up this and you will find your love of Doctor Who is restored. Lads, it's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure, lads. And thank you, Fred. You've been lively and nostalgic. Just before I go, I will just say that tomorrow there will be a saloon, and the saloon is a clash of the sci-fi titans imminent, because Straczynski, I can never say his name, is coming to the Wyoming. He's coming to the UK and he's looking for work. And RTD's a little mortally wounded in the writing stakes at the moment. So there's a tasty saloon for everybody tomorrow that will drop. And there's even more shows coming, but that's for another time. Thanks, lads. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Brendan.
Thanks, John. Thanks,
Thank you, Fred.
And thanks to all the viewers.